Happy to see you all here, and a very happy solstice to each of you, wherever you are. We have some friends from, let's see, Australia and Indonesia and US, Malaysia. So welcome to each and every one of you. What Ami and I would like to do to begin is to play a song to orient us. And maybe you have heard this song before, but it just came to my mind this morning. It's the old song by the Carpenters. It's called Bless the Beast and the Children. And it's so appropriate. The words are just so fitting for what we are engaged in tonight and what we'd like to share with you. And after we play that song, we're going to show just a few slides of orientation to our theme, which is interspecies communication within a multi-species world. We want to just give a few aspects of orientation, how we got here, and then that will be followed by an attunement. And then after the attunement, I'll tell you what we're going to do from there on. So let's just center ourselves in, and we'll just bring that song to mind, particularly all of the species of the planet for whom and why we're here tonight. So in the spirit of this song, we'd like to just begin with a little orientation of how some of the outside influences that have shaped us in our own practice of interspecies communication. And some of these perhaps could be references to you. You may want to look some of these people up who have been doing this work for many, many years. So the first influence for us has been was Anna Breitenbach, and she is a animal communicator from South Africa, who we discovered quite a number of years ago, and we have been listening to her and being inspired and influenced by her. So she has a very well-known communicator at this point in time. And the second aspect of recent influence came from the University of Saskatchewan. And so from May 8th to 12th of this year, the university, which we thought, we were very surprised, this is getting into research and methodology in research. So that university had the International Multispecies Research Symposium, which was called Intuitive Interspecies Communication. And Anna Breitenbach, who we just introduced you to, was the keynote speaker here, but many excellent speakers. And this university is dedicated to deepening the dialogue between the interspecies communicators and the scientific approach through research. The third influence, which is recent, is a world summit called Conversations with Nature, which was put on just in April by a woman named P. Horsley. And she brings animal communicators from all over the world into a summit. And she's interviewing each one of them over the course of 3 or 4 days. So she's speaking. This summit really brought in our perspective on many aspects of our world and how people are dedicating themselves to particular communications, such as with whales or with fire, with snakes, with the white lions, etc. And then the next influence is, and she is known as the grandmother of interspecies communication. Her name is Penelope Smith. She wrote probably one of the first books of having to do with animal communication when this was not a known topic at all, and it was considered very out there to be engaged in such a topic. And she stepped out despite a lot of ridicule and a lot of resistance. But her book, Animal Talk, is something we recommend because it's a basic book on interspecies communication. But she also has many, many other reflections and a few other books. And she also has online a code of ethics. So when you're working with people who are working professionally in this field of animal communication. And then we've been influenced and inspired this past months by Animal Talk Africa. And this is a group of people who are preserving and protecting the white lions of South Africa. And they also offer talks and instructions, courses on interspecies communication and activism. And of course, and fundamentally, our teachers are the beings of this land. So these are the beings that we communicate with here, have had communication with, the bobcat, the chickadee, the bear, and the butterfly, and many others. But we would be remiss if we didn't mention our own land and the beings of this land, who are our primary teachers. And lastly, we'll bring your attention to a man by the name of James French, who has created a detailed and in-depth technique called the trust technique, which helps a person establish trust with various species, particularly if the species is agitated, if someone including our own species, but it's a beautiful technique to help us get into a calm state, and then to help an animal get into a calm state, because they also can be agitated at times. And in order to do a good animal communication, this is the first step. So given that, we thought that Ami and I could now introduce you, give you an experience of the trust technique, because this is the foundation to any kind of animal communication. You have to establish trust and a centeredness in self. So Ami, would you like to offer us that attunement and teach us how to do that trust technique?
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good evening, everyone. So I'm going to guide you step by step doing this very basic that Gail mentioned about trust technique. Basically, it's quieting the mind, and which is a very key for interspecies communication. And as I'm guiding you, there will be pauses between steps to allow you to follow the instructions. So I will try to be very slow as much as possible. I know I tend to speak very fast, but I'll try my best. And you can start with try to find a comfortable position, and you don't have to look into the screen. You can look to other direction as long as you can hear my voice. That will be good. Okay, and somebody was knocked out, and then let him back into the room, so he will follow. Okay. Okay, now the first step is we're going to start by assessing our own level of calmness and bring it into our body, because our body is always in the here and now, so it can never be somewhere else. That's why we are going to start quieting the mind and bring it to the present moment. Okay. In order to understand the level of calmness, we have to know what state we are in at this moment. So if we use a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 is the calmest and 10 is the least calmed, how would you assess yourself? Is there any disturbing thought or feeling present in you? find the most appropriate number that corresponds with it. Okay, when you already decide which number of your level of calmness, now we are going to put our attention on keeping everything as still as we can. Our eyes focus on one spot, and you can also close your eyes, by the way, no problem. And we will try to be focused on keeping even the littlest of movement and try to be like a statue, except for the natural things like breathing, of course, for example. Focus on one spot, whether you close your eyes or you open your eyes. By this time, you should feel that your breathing and your heart rate flow at the most natural state. Our body will feel more relaxed and tensions are low. Our neck, our shoulder are soft. Keep our attention on one spot. And now we are going to add our focus on our hearing. While you keep your body still, you can also listen to a sound that you hear from around you. And if your room is very quiet, listen to the white noise. And now we're going to add yet another component by focusing also the sensation of the touch. That could be from the clothes that touching your skin or your body to the chair you are sitting on. And now assess one more time your level of calmness. What number are you choose this time? Is there any change? Do you feel calmer? And lastly, take a deep inhale and exhale. And when you are ready, you can open your eyes and focus back your attention to the screen. Now, I would like to invite you to speak a word or a phrase. And when you want to say something, please unmute yourself. How is the experience of just a brief exercise of calming ourselves?
Porous. Presence. Relaxing.
So even these three words, porous, presence, relaxing, are what is needed at the beginning of any communication with any of the species. And James French, in many videos we've watched of him, when he gets into this place, which is number one. So if you're at a 10 or 9 or 8, 7, any of those numbers, the communication won't really work. The mind is too energetically dissipated, and the animals, there's not a good connection. So they all insist, particularly all of them, and even Anna Breitenbach, who we showed you on the slide, before she does any kind of communication, she works on herself for 15 minutes to a half hour, doing these kind of techniques to get from wherever you are to a 1. And when James French does it, the animal itself, all of the animals he works with will eventually lie down. Like a dog will lie down and get on its back, or a cat will do the same. The horses do the same. So he has shown that it has a reciprocal effect of calming not just the self, but it will calm the animal too. So that's why we're introducing you to this technique called the trust technique. And what Ami shared is the basic way of getting, it's the most condensed and simple way of getting into that state to make yourself ready for a communication.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Ami, did you have something?
Yeah, and we have to keep on practice in doing this. One time is not enough. Keep on building up the skill to enter into that calmness space faster. As we practice and practice, we'll get used to with this method.
Yes. So moving on from that, now we have the base. We wanted to ask the question, well, we were asking the question of you and of each other, Well, what is it that brought us into an awareness of interspecies communication, whether we have done it or that we even had an awareness that species can communicate? So, Ami, I'll ask you first. I'll ask you the question. Could you give an example of what brought you into this animal communication or interspecies communication
Mm.
possibility or
Yeah,
awareness?
yeah. As the two of us are preparing this session tonight, all the memories came back, and yet what I can say that that my attention to the interspecies communication intentionally started about probably 5 or 6 years ago, when somebody invited me to join a session linking awareness journey from somebody from Canada, British Columbia, who happened to do a session in Indonesia while I made my home visit. And we went to an elephant sanctuary, and she taught us the techniques that is more, advanced than what we are practiced tonight, and to have communication with the elephants, because in the past time there was a conflict between the human and the elephants in that particular area. So that's what makes me feel like it was really a very profound experience, that there are so many messages that the elephants trying to communicate to us. So that's my experience. And what about you, Gail?
Yes, also so many memories came up, and when one of the memories was when I was a child and I was at a family gathering, and it was at a beach, and someone had found a big shell, a big conch shell with the being still inside the shell, and they took it and put it on the porch because they wanted to take the shell back with them. Yet the being was struggling for water. It couldn't keep itself alive, and I literally heard it communicate with me, and it said, "Help me, help me." And I felt the trauma of its struggle. It was couldn't breathe. So I ran and got some water and threw the water in, but the person who got that shell, I just couldn't save the being. They just took it, and I just felt the I felt it as it was dying. I felt it screaming for help. And that was probably my first communication event. And then I wanted to just mention another one. I was reading many years ago the work, and I took some courses with a tracker by the name of Tom Brown, he's a famous tracker in the United States. And in the book, he worked with a Native American man, and he would say, "I don't understand this, but every time I meet grandfather in the woods, I go down the path, and grandfather says to me, 'What's the matter with you today?' Every time I was disturbed," he said, the grandfather said, "What's wrong with you?" And he said, "I couldn't understand how this man would know I'm disturbed because I wasn't saying I am." So one day, Tom Brown said to grandfather, how do you know I'm disturbed?" And the grandfather said, "When you're coming down the path, when you are disturbed, the trees and the bushes and the branches move ever so slightly away. And when you are in coherence, they move ever so slightly toward." And that was such a revelation to me of the capacity, the energetics of an interrelationality of ourselves with the totality. And that kind of so sensitive to our movements, our thoughts. And he said that a busy mind is like a megaphone in the natural world, and it's picked up by all the beings energetically. So that was a big, wow. Ami, maybe do you have another one? And then we're going to ask all of you to share.
Yeah.
Would you?
Like actually, I believe each one of us have this experience, especially all of you who have pets, cats or dogs, And I remember since young, and a lot of these animal communicators are saying actually as a child, there is a tendency to be able to easily catch the what we call as energy or communication from the other species. And I remember when I was young, I like to just, speak to the goldfish or the cat. And one of the cat that that our family had, I was like probably about 12, 13 years old, and the cat slept with me. And every Thursday night, my father had a sport badminton, and he always came home late. And he never brought the key to the house. So whenever he arrived at home, my cat would wake me up, and then he would run in front of the door of my room. I opened the door, and he wait there, and then he run again. I slept in the second floor, so he went at the edge of the stairs and look at me. And when he saw already I'm walking, he's going down halfway. And then that's continue until in front of the door, and he was just scratching the door and asking to open. That's happened again and again and again. So obviously the cat was communicating something to me, so that's experience. And there's so many more, Gil, so many more. So, all the memories come back, isn't it?
I know. I will say one more very short one. I was on a sabbatical about 5 years ago, and because we had already been doing this interspecies communication, I thought, and working with Thomas Berry for all these years, I thought I was aware, and I thought I was conscious. But I was in New York and I would go to this cafe every single day, and for some tea or to work in the cafe. And the cafe, there were trees, like, indoor house plants inside the cafe. And yeah, so anyway, I'm having tea in there every day and for quite a long time. And I invited a friend to come visit. And so we went into that cafe, and the minute she stepped in to that cafe, she said, I am going to go up to the front desk. I have to tell the manager that these plants in here are not being watered. They're so dry and they need water. And I was shocked. I knew the plants were in the room, but as backdrop, almost as the cup of tea was more important. The plants were, I couldn't believe I was so closed off to these beings. And ever since that time, when I walk into a store now or any place, I'm super aware of how are the plants in this store? Are they getting the water they need? And anyway, it was an example of the levels of consciousness. Like my friend was so aware, and she woke my consciousness up. So it's so helpful when we could do that for each other, to wake up each other's consciousness with the community of life. Someone might be sensitive to plants, but lose consciousness when it comes to insects or snakes or whatever. So yes, so what we'd like to do is just for 4 minutes, because of our time. Let me just see our time. Probably we'll give 5 minutes, and let's just do a quick a breakout room of actually we'll do 6 minutes, a breakout room of 3. So we'll go into breakout rooms of 3. And would you mind sharing your own experience with communication, or any experience that's coming to you of interspecies awareness, something along the lines of what we've been sharing? So Maria, if you could put us into groups of 3 for about 6 minutes, and more or less take about 2 minutes of time each. We basically know what about 2 minutes is, so make sure your partners have a chance to speak as well. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Gail. So there are 2 groups will behave 2. So I'll just put a group of 3 and 2. Okay, enjoy the sharing. So I'm going to open the room.
Welcome back, everyone, and hope you had a good conversation and sharing with each other. And now what we'd like to do is just explore the question, what is interspecies communication? And let's just look at some of the dimensions of that. So we're going to actually just give 3 aspects of interspecies communication, and with a few examples, and then lead you in a communication. And that will be our evening. So the time's going quick. So the first thing regarding interspecies communication is that there needs to be an awareness that it's telepathic. It's a telepathic connection in a two-way communication. So it isn't a one-way communication. And it is in no way about domination. Like, oh, I'm going to communicate to my dog that I want him to behave this way. That's a one-way communication. This is about evocation, not domination. So telepathic communication has to do with a two-way communication in which we listen to the other. And sometimes we may make a request of the other and the other doesn't want to abide by it. So we have to negotiate. Like we have mice in our place and we don't want them in the house. So we have been communicating with them and they will not oftentimes abide by our desire and our boundary. Like we have boundaries here, you have the whole outside and you can't come in, but they don't, they won't. Sometimes they'll give us that communication, like we like it in the house. So then we have to negotiate and say, well, we're going to give you, we say to them, we'll give you 3 days to get out, and then we're putting the traps out. We don't want to put the traps out, but if you don't go, you're going to be jeopardizing yourself. So you get what I mean. It's a two-way communication. And to begin, as we said, we began with the James French technique. So you always need to begin in a calm and a fully present way. And inside of this first part, it's a heart-centered, it's always a heart-centered communication. And it is based in unconditional love for other. And lastly, in order to even begin, so these are the kind of first couple of qualities, directionalities of how you even begin. Can you even begin a communication? So if you are not, a person is not aware of the fact that each being has its own agency, an agency, they have their agency to live their own lives. They have their own feelings and their own intelligence. If you cannot absorb that or understand that, then you really cannot do the communication. So these are the qualities of the opening part of that. So you would need to be established in those. And second, one always has to prepare a question in the communication. You need to drill down very clearly and succinctly, because the interspecies communication, the species don't like small talk. So you can't be all over the place, spinning all over the place with your communication. It has to drill down, such as always when you begin, would you like to talk with me? So you need to get their permission. Sometimes they don't want to. Then you move on and say, okay, thank you. But always the question, would you like to? Then if they say yes, then you ask, how are you today? Rather than jumping into, well, can you help me with this? Or I want this, or I want you to do this. It's just protocol, like just manners, as you would with another human, right? You're not going to jump right in. You're like, oh, how are you today? So the same with them. And then you would ask, a question such as, you might ask, what do you need? How can I help you? Or do you have a message for me? You get this? This is very simple statements, simple questions. And then at the end of the communication, is there anything else you would like to share? So these are some examples of the question part of it, of the communication. And then the third part is, how do you know you have had a communication? So we'll go over this a little bit. what we hear again and again from these animal communicators is to trust the first fleeting impression. So when you're doing a communication and you're asking your animal being, like, how are you, or can you help me, or what is needed right now, whatever that is, you trust that first fleeting uh, impression. And then the impression can come, and often comes in mental images. So how you know how is this? It comes in a mental picture, or a feeling, or a gut knowing, or a smell or a taste. Rarely in words, but sometimes a word like no, or yes, or do it. If in your language, or usually you'll see it in your language, it'll get transmitted energetically into your language, but very succinct. And Ami, do you fill in on that, regarding how, and anything about receiving that communication?
The big challenge is our doubting minds, actually, because we tend to oh, this is only my imagination, or things like that. When we are doing the animal communication or interspecies communication, we don't have give rooms for thinking or for analyzing. It has to be very quick. The moment you receive something, take notes. Or as we practice again and again, sharpening our senses, you will be surprised, because sometimes it just come through your taste buds. Sometimes, like when you practice, like say you touch a particular plants, and then something in your taste buds, bitter or something like sweet or whatever, it will come, and the senses. And sometimes, like for example, when people walk into the park where there are animals, wild animals, sometimes people are afraid. If you are sensitive and you are not busy talking, and in the busy mind, your body can give you a kind of like information. Like one time I was doing the work and the bear is around, and my body feel it. It's a kind of like a push that I need to leave that space. So I just follow, and then after a while the bear came, or a pull to move into a certain direction. And true enough, there was a frog at that time was dying, so asking for help, so that's kind of like a feeling, a sensation, the image, or whatever that Gail mentioned before. And the most important becomes familiar as you practice. Normally there is one or two modes that is stronger in you. It could be the mental image, it could be the taste, it could be the sound, and so just keep on practice. That's important.
Yeah, I think maybe if we give you an example, a few examples, sometimes you don't have to do a communication. For example, we're teaching you how to move into that trust technique, right? To calm and then ask the question, etc. But in this kind of interspecies communication, sometimes the communication happens, and you don't ask for it. So for example, a few weeks ago, we had a photographer visiting here, and she's come here many times, and she likes to go out and take photographs of the plants and of the birds and the trees, etc. And we had our bird feeder out, and she was sitting the next morning, sitting in our living space, and I went outside put bird seed in the bird feeder. And I suddenly got I didn't ask for this, but suddenly I got a flash of communication from the birds saying, oh, we don't like it when people just take our photographs and they don't establish any kind of rapport with us. They just come and take the photograph. And I was shocked that this communication came unbidden. And I realized, yeah, that they don't like that. And, we wouldn't like that either, probably, people just taking our photos without someone asking. So that's another dimension of the interspecies communication when it's an instant. So it comes direct as a download. Do you have an example, Ami, of an interspecies, a real communication?
Yeah, it's probably similar with what Gail's experience, because our land is, we live closely with all the inhabitants of the land, animals, trees, insects, all sort of that. So one moment I had this experience that I feel so down in the feel like I'm struggling with the human species. You know, it's not only my own stuff, but also looking at the reality. What are we to the planet? What are we doing? You know, it's like, excuse my language, I feel like there's a lot of shit, you know, in ourselves. Like, and I just need to get rid of that crazy things, you know. So I went to the back of our land, and I was just laying down on the grass, and then just praying and trying in my imagination, trying to get rid of that shitty things from my body, you know. And then while really feel so deep sadness, and then at some point I was sitting down, and there is a dragonfly flying and then perch on my shoes, and then like, oh, that's a very cute dragonfly. And then automatically it's like, oh, I just wanted to touch, you know, which is not a good practice. I was like, oh, can I just touch you? And I feel like, oh, of course not, because, you know, I'm not in a good space. I have so many things in my mind. But lo and behold, the dragonfly make a circle, and then as I pull my hand, it's landed on my palm. And then it makes a certain movement, and oh my God, and the dragonfly pooping, it it let the shit out of its body. And then I feel like it's an encouragement. Yes, just do it, just let all the things out. And I feel like I was just laughing, and it was just, for me, it's hilarious. So from that, the feeling of so sad and feel so down and upset, I feel uplifted. And all we keep on spreading our energy and our, you know, we communicate, and they respond. And I run to Gail, you will not believe this has happened. And that happened. She is shuffling all the manure. She's also, yeah, look at me, I hid all the horse shit here. It was just so funny. Yeah, that's my experience.
One time we had a bird that fell through our chimney, and it was stuck in the chimney flue. And the chimney flue had an L like this, so it was stuck in that part like that. So it didn't just fall right down, because it was stuck in that thing like this. So it stayed there. We tried to communicate on the night that it happened, and we opened the doors of the fireplace, and we're communicating, just come out, and it didn't. So the next morning we did another communication, and we got into that state of calm, and then we visualized. So it's good to communicate in visual. So if you, for example, now this bird is stuck, so we're visualizing mentally drop down the pipe, and the doors are open of the fireplace. So we're visualizing it to this bird. And then we're visualizing when you get down, look to your left, there's a window, and the window was only able to open this much, but we visualize the bird. So we're telling it visually, fly out that window. And we had to burst the bubble of doubt, because we're thinking, wow, you know how it is when a bird gets in a house, it goes, and now this bird had been in the fireplace stuck for probably almost 24 hours. So we had to not go there, you know, not doubt that this was going to happen. So Ami and I were doing this, and then we said, let's leave it alone for a little bit, which we did. And then I came up and I sat in the room, and I said, what do you need from me? How can I help you? And it said, visually, sit where you are, not too close to the fireplace where I'm going to come out, but sit where you are and stay calm. Then Ami came up, and we were both by the door of this room. And within 30 seconds, it dropped down, it looked at us, and it flew seamlessly out that small window. And it followed the visual. And then about an hour later, we asked the question, if you're okay visually, we were an imaging. If you are okay, would you let us know? And it was a woodpecker. So we said, if you're okay, would you let us know? And then at that moment, it started to peck on the tree in which I was right under. And Ami was in the garden and she heard it as well. So that was a very intense and very real communication through image. So yeah, maybe if anyone has, we're not able to do the guided meditation because of our time. We only have an hour, but maybe we have 3 minutes. If anyone has a question or a comment, or Ami, if you had anything else, we could just use that time, and we'll be back again next week.
Yeah, next week there will be another session. Probably we could practice next week and something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
we'll
today
practice.
today it's good 12 because we forgot that today is summer solstice and there are so many events and people probably going to other events. So, but it's good with small group anyway.
I have a question. Your energetic communication, right? As opposed to verbal communication.
Yes. Yes. It's more in the energy field, Loretta,
Okay.
like using those means of not words, but visualizations.
Gail, I'm sitting here thinking about the work of Robert Sardello that I practiced with, where, the lovely contemplative practice, and then to bring into your heart space the kind of visual encounter that you may have had with the animal, and to just sit there quietly and to continue to listen to what it may want to talk to you about, which is a really lovely practice. If you look at his book, Heartfulness, then there is an invitation. And I'm just trying to think of the Mercy sister, who's also been in Australia with Margie Abbott and the Mercy Women, and who's taught us some of these techniques of heartfulness to continue that communication in that way. It's not just a one-off. It's like that, bring that animal back, allow it in, invite it back into your heart space and to continue to kind of communicate with it. It's a beautiful practice. Yes. So I'm just wondering.
We have that book, Judith. We can look at that book during the week. And maybe we could bring some of that into the space. And I think that was Brenda Pettigrew.
Brenda Pettigrew.
Yes. Yeah, I know, 'cause with Robert Sardello.
Yes.
She works. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that in. We'll check
a lovely practice.
Yes. And there's many ways to, like, thanks for bringing that in. We just brought in James French as one way to start with, but there's a lot of different ways. Yeah. And would anyone else have a question before we close, or a comment? Okay, well, why don't we close by bringing to mind one being that you love very much, whether it has passed or is present now, or is someplace in the world that and you love either that species or that being. So take a moment now just to on this solstice day, to bring that beautiful being forward. And at the count of 3, just speak out into the space with gratitude, the name of the species or the being with whom you're thinking about right now. 1, 2, 3.
The purple vine.
Thank you. Okay, good. Well, thank you, everyone. And we hope this was helpful, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
you.
Terima kasih.
Thank you,
friends
Maria,
from
for helping
Indonesia.
us out.
Makasih.
Thank you,
Thank
Gail.
you,
Thank you,
Indonesian friends. Thank you.
Thank
Terima
you.
kasih.
for this experience.
Makasih.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you, Gail.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Emma.
Judith.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you. Yeah,
Bye.
thank you,
Bye, Rose.
everybody.
Thank you.